that are lined up along the back wall. So just no personal recordings, okay? Appreciate it. All rise. Department 24 of the Superior Court of California in and for the County of Sacramento is in session. The Honorable Michael Bowman, Judge, presiding. Please be seated and come to order.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Department 24. I'm Judge Michael Bowman, and due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the need for social distancing, this matter is being heard remotely to accommodate the public's right, as well as the victims and victims' family members' right to be at these proceedings. All who've entered the building have had their temperature taken. In addition, the court has granted access to the press, and this matter is being live streamed to the public as well. Masks will be worn at all times unless the attorneys are speaking, and they may remove their masks at that time. I will be wearing a mask unless I'm speaking on the record as well. Thank you. This is to assist the court reporter to ensure that we have an accurate and complete record of these proceedings. I would remind you that we're still in a courtroom, so there's no talking in the audience, no use of cameras unless previously been approved by the court, and please no cell phones. This is the matter of the people of the state of California versus Joseph James DeAngelo. That's case 18FE008017. The matter is on calendar here today for imposition and judgment and sentence. Mr. DeAngelo is present. Can I have defense counsel please state their names for the record? Thank you, counsel. Can I have the people of the state of California also announce their presence?
Good morning, Your Honor. Anne-Marie Schubert, District Attorney, Sacramento County, for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Greg Totten, District Attorney of Ventura County, for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Todd Spitzer, Orange County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Dinah Becton, Contra Costa County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joyce Dudley for the people of Santa Barbara County.
Good morning, Your Honor. Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Nancy O'Malley, Alameda County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Tori Verber Salazar on behalf of the people of San Joaquin County for the great state of California.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So at this time, I'm going to, let me ask Mr. Kress, do you waive formal arraignment for judgment and sentence? All right, I'm going to arraign Mr. DeAngelo on the charges post plea on June 29th, 2020. The defendant entered a plea of guilty to the following crimes. Count 1, charge of murder of Claude Snelling, which occurred on September 11th, 1975 in the county of Tulare, a violation of Penal Code Section 187(a), murder in the first degree. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 2, the charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, which occurred on February 2nd, 1978 in the county of Sacramento. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 3, the charge of murder in the first degree of Brian Majori, which occurred on February 2nd, 1978 in the county of Sacramento. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 4, the charge of murder in the first degree of Deborah Manning, which occurred December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance of that murder of Deborah Manning, and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Deborah Manning was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, paren 5. Count 5, the charge of murder in the first degree of Robert Offerman, which occurred on December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Robert Offerman was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, paren 5. Count 6, the charge of murder in the first degree of Sherry Domingo, which occurred on July 27th, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance in the murder of Sherry Domingo in that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Sherry Domingo was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 7, the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, which occurred July 27th, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Greg Sanchez was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 8, the charge of murder in the first degree, Darlene Smith, which occurred between the dates of March 13th, 1980 and March 16th, 1980 in the county of Ventura. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Charlene Smith in that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance the murder of Charlene Smith was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 9, the charge of murder in the first degree of Lyman Smith, which occurred between the dates of March 13th, 1980 and March 16th, 1980 in the county of Ventura. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Lyman Smith was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 10, the charge of murder in the first degree of Patrice Harrington, which occurred on August 21st, 1980 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Patrice Harrington that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Patrice Harrington was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 11, the charge of murder in the first degree of Keith Harrington, which occurred on August 21st, 1980 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance of the murder of Keith Harrington that the murder was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 12, the charge of murder in the first degree of Manuela Whitnew, which occurred on February 6, 1981 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Manuela Whitenu and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Manuela Whitenu was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 13, the charge of murder in the first degree of Janelle Cruz, which occurred May 5th, 1986 in the County of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Janelle Cruz and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Janelle Cruz was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. In addition, the defendant admitted that he did commit multiple murders within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 3, and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 7, in counts 2 through 13. Count 14, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 1, having occurred on September 4th, 1976 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 15, charge of kidnap with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 2, having occurred on April 2nd, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery in violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 16, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 3, having occurred April 15th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the commission of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 17, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 4, having occurred May 3rd, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 18, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 5, having occurred May 14th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 19, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 6, having occurred May 17th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 20, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 7, which occurred on May 28th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 21, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 8, having occurred on October 1st, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant, he admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 22, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 9, having occurred on October 21st, 1977 in the county of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 23, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 10, having occurred October 7th, 1978 in the county of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. Count 24, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 11, which occurred on October 13th, 1978 in the county of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. Count 25, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 12, having occurred October 28th, 1978 in the county of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, and that he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery as well, violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 26, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 13, having occurred on June 11th, 1979 in the county of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. I'm going to hear from, we're going to hear from the people on this imposition of sentencing. I believe the district attorney from Contra Costa County wishes to be heard first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dinah Beckton, District Attorney for Contra Costa County. Over 4 decades, that's a long time to wait for justice to be served. Finally, we have arrived at that day, the day when those who have waited so very long will hear that Joseph DeAngelo will now serve the rest of his life behind bars. The boogeyman, the man whose horrific, unspeakable crimes devastated the lives of so many people, lives that will never be the same, lives forever changed. Moments, hours of terror that can never be erased or forgotten. I want to underscore the strength of our victims and their families, the courage that they've displayed over the years, and their courage this week to come forward, share in open court with all of us the pain and the agony that they have endured over the years. After today's sentencing, Mr. DeAngelo will never threaten our victims again. He will never harm another soul. His evil actions are hard to describe and recount. The victims in this case bravely told the court this week the lasting trauma and pain caused by DeAngelo's horrific actions. As a former Superior Court judge myself, hearing from victims during the sentencing phase of a case is powerful and very sobering. Those whose lives were forever changed deserved a day in court. And I want to thank the court for allowing each victim who had the courage and the determination to come forward, allowing them the time to speak. We appreciate the opportunity for their voices to be heard. Thank you, Your Honor. Let us not forget the important words this week from these men and women and their families. Their words were hard to listen to due to the depravity displayed by Mr. DeAngelo, who preyed upon these victims. I appreciate the courage that it took to come forward. Just emphasizing a few statements from our victims in Contra Costa County One said, "I survived and thrived because of the love and the support of friends and family, for which I can never thank them enough." Now, here we are, all strong women, not victims, having our say to a madman. Another said, "Finally, I can go forward. I have the justice I have been waiting so long for. I never thought I would get it." And last but not least, one said, "We are committed and determined not to let these hours in October 1978 define who we are and what we were to become." I am so encouraged to hear that by finally seeing justice served, our victims now have hope. They have hope for a future. The criminal justice system is often complex, long-winded, and slow. In this case, for decades, DeAngelo eluded capture. However, thanks to the task force under Sacramento District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, he was brought into custody. Law enforcement officials never gave up hope that we could bring the Golden State Killer to justice. The history in this case and the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office history is tied to our former cold case investigator, Paul Hull. Mr. Hull spent decades, much of his career, and he played a tremendous role in solving this case and bringing us to this day of reckoning. I want to express my gratitude for Paul Hull's tireless work on this case on behalf of the victims across the state of California. The entire prosecution team spent countless hours to bring this case to a resolution and to assist the victims throughout this entire process, including our victim witness advocates and our attorneys. And I thank the team for the important work that you have done to bring this case to an end. The crimes spanned over 13 years that we know of. The seriousness and the gravity of the offenses, the psychological harm, the pain and the brutality of these offenses requires nothing less than the imposition of the maximum sentence. The victims must be assured that Mr. DeAngelo will never, ever walk this earth again as a free man. Your Honor, I stand for the people to respectfully thank the court for imposing the maximum amount of time allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The district attorney from Orange County wish to be heard.
Good morning, Your Honor. If it pleases the court, I cannot thank you enough on behalf of the people of Orange County and the people of the state of California for your grace and your patience, Your Honor. You have been amazing, and I know everybody in this room agrees just how much you have allowed us so much leeway and courtesy during these proceedings. I just wanted to publicly acknowledge you and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I also would like to thank my team, Debbie Lloyd, Dennis Conway, Pat Dixon, Investigator Hutchcraft, Investigator Doyle, Law Clerk Rebecca Malkin, and of course, I want to thank Anne Marie and her team. And I want to acknowledge, Your Honor, in public, that just the amazing work of the district attorneys who work collaboratively to bring this case to justice. Many people don't know there's two interesting things about a case where a death penalty is on the line. One is that is a decision of the elected district attorneys and no one else. And in California, the only sentence that's handed down by a jury is death. Yesterday marked 40 years to the date that a stranger walked into Patty and Keith Harrington's Dana Point home and robbed those 3-month newlyweds of their life. Yesterday, the day the two brothers testified about their youngest brother, Keith. They never made it to their first wedding anniversary. Manuela Whittam spent 28 short years on this earth, never knowing the joy of motherhood. And you heard yesterday that her surviving husband never lead an appropriate life until he died. Janelle Cruz, 18 years old, life was ended before she realized her dreams of graduating from college or picking out a wedding dress. Natural things we all live for in our lives. For the last 3 days, we heard about the 13 lives that were cut short through murder. We heard of the memories that were never made. We heard of the dozens and dozens of sexual assault victims who had to go through that depraved act while some of their husbands watched, which is beyond comprehension for me. As he was destroying your lives, he got to be on his boat, blow out birthday candles, hold his granddaughter. But all the time in the back of his mind, he knew we would get. Sir, in 2006, when I was the chairman of the committee that oversaw state prisons in the state assembly for the state of California, I watched the last man executed in the San Quentin death chamber. I was a witness to that death. When I was elected district attorney and this case became mine on behalf of the Orange County citizens, I wanted one thing. I wanted to wait those 25 years. And when I was at 85 or beyond, depending on how long it took for you to appeal your death sentence, I wanted them to wheel me in on my wheelchair. And instead of just staring straight forward in some glazed over eyes, I wanted to stare at you and watch you silently slip into the night. Never again to take away anybody's dreams that you ruined and the nightmares you created. I wanted to watch that. You made it personal, and it was personal for me on behalf of all these people. I honestly believe that this person, not even a person, this beast deserved the ultimate punishment of death. But we met with our victims. We knew the age of the case. We knew how long it took to solve. And we knew that this was the right thing to do so you could all be here today in your lifetime, as long as you had this opportunity. Today, this event today is a sentencing. Early in the week was a celebration of life on behalf of the victim. But today is a sentence. And it's meant for the victims who are silently now in heaven, or those of you who, thank God, are still here on earth, who now can become free from the shackles that you have been forced to endure since your paths intersected with the devil. Today, it's the devil who will be condemned to be behind bars for the rest of his life. He will never be free, thank God. He may have destroyed lives, but he has not destroyed memories. And I'm so grateful for the stories that all of you shared this week on behalf of your loved ones and behalf of yourselves. But for the victims whose voices have been stolen, and the family members who sadly ran out of time and could not make it here today, I want you to know that there are 13 angels watching this today. And they're with us right now. They have this opportunity to see this too. I would ask that as we are in the presence of these 13 who have left this earth but have gone to a better place, that you join me in a moment of silence for them and for all those who are still here with us or who may have passed but have experienced this horror and this nightmare. You would bow your heads. On behalf of the people of Orange County and the state of California, Your Honor, again, please accept our just heartfelt thank you for the way you've conducted this court, your personnel. We're so appreciative.
Thank you, Mr. Spitzer. Would the district attorney representing Santa Barbara wish to be heard?
Thank you, Your Honor. 25 years ago, I prosecuted my first sexual assault case in which the recipient witness was a loved one of the victims. At that point, I assumed the only traumatized person would be the victim. 3 groups of people in this courtroom know that that assumption is wrong. The recipient witnesses of crimes committed by the defendant, the prosecutors, and the defendant himself. I know the recipient witnesses know that because they lived through it. I know the prosecutors know that because they listened carefully to those witnesses. And I know the defendant knows that because he is driven to inflict the greatest amount of pain that he possibly can. And therefore, it wasn't enough for him to rape or beat or shoot his victims. He wanted to take inflicting human pain to the highest level possible. Therefore, he often ensured that their loved ones saw or heard his victims being tortured or killed. That's just who Joe DeAngelo is. My best friend, LADA Jackie Lacey, recently told me, if you really want to hurt me, hurt someone I love. Well, this defendant really wanted to hurt. He really wanted to hurt as many people as he could, and he did just that. Around the same time that I prosecuted that case, I prosecuted my first rape of an intoxicated person case. Again, at that point, I assumed that if she couldn't remember being raped, that had to be better than remembering the gory details. Once again, I was wrong. And how do I know that? Because the victim told me so. She said, every morning when I wake up, my first thought is that something terrible happened to me. I just don't know what. I just don't know what. I don't think I can ever get over this thing until I know those details. And then she started to cry. And a very long minute went by, and she said, I'm actually jealous of rape victims who remember being raped. Yesterday, as I listened to Debbie Dominguez's powerful, powerful words about not being able to enter her home or know the details of what happened. And then I thought about Doug Domingo, Brian Sanchez, Dr. Offerman, all of whom are here today. And then all of the other victims' loved ones who will never know the details of what happened to their child, their mother, their father, their uncle, their friend. And I thought maybe some of them also felt they couldn't begin their healing process until they knew all the details. To them, I humbly suggest you don't. I too have experienced great loss. I too experienced that. And I believe you, like me, have a hole in your heart that you hope will never heal. Because you love them. You love them so very much. And I believe that is what you need to know to proceed with your healing process. What you need to know is what you already know. In life, you loved them and they loved you. And now that this case is finally over, perhaps what you need to concentrate on the details of that love. Focus on the things that made them lovable and allow yourself to let those memories make you smile again. I believe it is possible. True healing can come from that knowledge. Because knowing that you are loved and that you were loved is truly the most powerful knowledge of all. Again, thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the district attorney representing Tulare County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning, Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney. Your Honor, when your gavel falls today, this sentence will be final. And this case will soon then be viewed through the prism of history. And as we have seen and heard this week, the defendant slowly ceases to be the focal point of that story. Instead, my prayer going forward is the legacy which remains will focus on the triumph and the resiliency displayed by the survivors that we've heard from this week. Though questions will inevitably remain, we should continue to be steadfastly focused on the compassion justly due these families assembled here today. Though these despicable horrors began in Tulare County, we will not be defined by evil. Instead, our entire community stands silently alongside the Snelling, the Hupp, the McGowan families, and all families here today and families across this state. In searching for some positive message to remain, I say this: the triumphant spirit of these families loudly cries across this state and across the entire world in one unified single voice, crying out to other families who have been victimized, yet they patiently, agonizingly await their day in court. In that unified voice, the world is now told, never give up. You are not forgotten. Like many families that we've heard from this week, others across this nation are living a never-ending, nightmarish journey, a journey of continually closed doors. Today, they are shown and they are told, never give up hope. As science and technology evolve, the space for evil like this to operate within gets smaller and smaller. Simply put, the DNA will never forget. And by God's grace, may the doors of justice open for other families. That voice of hope is the true legacy that shall remain, and it shall not be silent, ever. On behalf of the Snelling, the Hupp, and McGowan families, the Visalia Police Department, and the entire Tulare County community, Your Honor, I want to thank you for providing a model of judicial decorum that has shown remarkable deference to the families and the survivors this week. You have given the state a glimpse into why we have a system of justice in the first place, and that is to serve victims. You have allowed their voices to resonate so loudly, and you have provided a model that other courts would do well to emulate.
Thank you, sir.
As District Attorney of Tulare County, as District Attorney of Tulare County, it is my honor to speak on behalf of the victims and survivors listed in count 1 of the complaint and give voice to Professor Snelling and Officer McGowan, who cannot do so today. But with their voice, I hereby ask you, Your Honor, to sentence this defendant to the maximum allowed under the law.
Thank you, sir. Does the District Attorney representing Ventura County wish to be heard?
Good morning, Your Honor. I too want to thank you for the courtesy and kindness you so graciously extended to each of the victims over the last 4 days. Your Honor, as we have witnessed during these victim impact statements, this is a case about light and darkness. The victims and survivors who testified before this court are people of light. By their courage, they have shined a very bright light on the magnitude of the crimes before this court. It painted a picture of the immense impact these horrific crimes had on their lives. In a sense, they have also brought to life their loved ones. In doing so, they have honored their memories as people of purpose, people of character, people that would have made a difference in this world were it not for their brutal murder at the hands of the defendant, who today, thank goodness, at last faces judgment. And in their statements, the victims and survivors also revealed to us the fundamental goodness of the human spirit and its will to endure, to thrive, even in the face of unspeakable suffering, loss. We must also confront the terrible darkness of the defendant, who sits before this court today stoic, devoid of humanity, lacking any remorse, and utterly unredeemable. And it is telling that his behavior, both during the crimes and since his arrest, reveals a person who consciously, who willfully, who intentionally avoids the light. His crimes were always committed in the dark of night. And it was common for him to cover lights, to cover furnishings, to cover televisions, to avoid any ambient light. And even now, here in this courtroom, he turns away from the light and dare not face or look at his accusers for fear that the truth of their testimonies might penetrate deep darkness. Yesterday, during his victim impact statement, Drew Wittoon likened this proceeding to the horror one might see in a war crime. Certainly no event in modern history can fully compare the extermination of 6 million Jews. But still, Wittoon's analogy is fitting in this case when one looks at the whole, the crimes committed by this defendant. defendant. That analogy also reminded me of a story that was told by the chief prosecutor at Turnbull, former United States Supreme Court Justice William H. Jackson. And the story, I believe, serves as a metaphor for the importance of the rule of law and justice itself, today and always. According to this story, a visitor at a cathedral under construction approached three workmen and asked them what it was that they were doing. They were all stonemasons. First muttered, "I'm earning a living." The second gave an uninspired reply, "I'm laying this stone." The third one looked up at the cathedral with a gleam in his eye and his face lit up by his and said, "I'm building a cathedral." Now, one might question the comparison of what we do here today to the building of a cathedral, particularly given the grotesque, gruesome, and ugly nature of the crimes before this court. But I do want to point out that over the last 4 days, we consciously and intentionally avoided showing any images of the gruesome crime scenes that are so much a part of this case. We did so not to marginalize the brutality and sheer cruelty of the defendant's crimes, but instead to honor, to shine a light on, and to pay tribute to the lives of the victims and their survivors. Your Honor, no one in this courtroom doubts or is uncertain about the ultimate sentence that you will impose today. And we acknowledge that no judgment by this court can bring back or fully restore the lives impacted by this cruel serial killer and rapist. Still, you have presided over a very emotional yet dignified and respectful proceeding for the purpose of meting out man's justice on this defendant. And as district attorney for the Ventura County, I am grateful for the way you have acquitted yourself, conducted the proceeding. It is also my fervent hope, my prayer, that much like that stonemason looking up at the beauty of the cathedral he was building, the victims who appeared before you can look up and feel a sense of renewed hope, sense of purpose, sense of life, with the knowledge that today, in this courtroom, in this time, in this place, we all did the very best we could do to deliver man's justice, which, as we know, is never fully adequate. I now respectfully ask the court to impose the maximum sentence authorized by law and the plea in this case. And I
Thank you, counsel. Does the district attorney representing Sacramento County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I stand here as the district attorney for Sacramento County, but I stand here incredibly proud of this team. I thank the defense team for your professionalism through the entirety of this litigation. Judge Bowman, you have demonstrated dignity and grace that is remarkable. It has been 16,417 days since Joseph DeAngelo began his reign of terror. 44 years, 11 months, and 11 days. For those in Sacramento, it's been 16,136 days since the first rape of Phyllis. 44 years, 2 months, and 4 days. It's been 42 years since Brian and Katie were taken from this world. And it's been 12,529 days since Janelle, that beautiful light, was taken. 34 years, 3 months, and 18 days. A few days after this plea agreement, the plea on June 29th, I had an email forwarded to me from a local journalist, from a woman from Sacramento named Pam. It could have been written today. In my belief, it encapsulates how I think everyone that has sat in this courtroom for this last week or sat in their homes and watched this transpire feels. And I'm going to quote that. I am wrung out. I almost put DeAngelo in the subject line, but I cannot give him any more headlines. I am 71 years old, third generation native Sacramentan. I lived through the terror of the East Area rapist. Over the past 40 years, I have read everything regarding this case. No window is ever open or unlocked at night, ever. Gates on either side of our home are locked always. Lights surround our home. My close friends all feel the same. Recently, a contractor in my home questioned why my sturdy, large, nailed picture window facing out hadn't been considered for replacement with, quote, nice sliders with screens to open out. I looked at the 40-something sternly and I said my always ready answer. 3 words: East Area rapist. He made some comment about how he'd heard something about him, but he'd been, quote, arrested. I explained, you don't understand. I lived it. It will never go away. She goes on to say, while I was not a victim, I was a victim. On Monday, June 29th, I sat in front of my TV and I cried. I cried for the victims. I cried for the families. The horror, the terror of what those who died went through in their final moments. As a person of faith, I put my faith in God's love, that He immediately covered those victims in peace and in love. I have to believe that in order to put my foot forward every day. Pam followed up with a note to me just a couple days ago. My heart, my being continues to weep for those victims. For the last week, our hearts and our beings have wept for each of his victims and their families. Their words and their stories will never be forgotten. As described by so many of the murder victim families and the crime victims, our society has been deprived of exceptional and extraordinary people. These rapes and these murders, in the words of our victims, have cut across families, friends, generations, and entire communities. In the words of Brian Sanchez, overwhelming grief is an understatement, and true justice is an overstatement. Personally, I have faith that their souls have been covered in peace and love. My greatest hope for all of these victims and their families, perhaps, is best put in their own words, as we heard this week. The greatest revenge is to live your lives. Paint your children and your grandchildren's rooms again with hearts and rainbows. Water ski again. Know that the monster of your childhood or your younger years is gone forever and will die alone in the dark. To the defendant, or as Mr. Wittun called him, the convict, there is honestly little left to say. Your name will fade from the headlines. But despite that fade, know one thing. Until the day you leave this earth, this incredible team, a team that has worked for decades to find you, to arrest you, prosecute you, convict you, will not just promise you, but will ensure that you will never succeed at deceiving or manipulating the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation into believing that you are some feeble, inept old man who somehow deserves better housing, treatment, or privilege. Lastly, Your Honor, and perhaps in what I think are some of the most powerful words we heard this week from Chris Pedretti, Mr. DeAngelo, there is no prayer strong enough to save.
Thank you, Counsel. Well, we're going to take a very, and I mean very short break, like 5 minutes. I'm going to have my court reporter exchange out for another court reporter. I wouldn't wander off too far. Okay.
All right, everybody, we're going to be in recess for about 5 minutes. If you could just recess in place, that would be great. Just remember, it's only going to be about 5 minutes, so if you step out to use the restroom, hurry back, please.
He didn't participate in sports. He showed no interest because his father didn't take an interest in sports or his son. Joe never complained or aired his feelings about things that bothered him. He was not a braggart. I always remember him as smiling, laughing, and enjoying being around the family. I remember nights when my mom was so tired, but she couldn't go to bed because several of my brother's buddies were gathered to discuss girls and dating, and Mom always made time for them. She answered their questions and listened to them. Joe was there on several occasions. He came to the house quite often. After joining the military, he always spent time with the family when home on leave. He brought Mom gifts from different ports of call. When Joseph graduated from high school, joined the military, became a police officer, got married, and had children, the entire family was proud of him, just like we were with every accomplishment of each other. Joseph was a close friend, another brother, respectful to Mom and Pop, and always polite. He was helpful and considerate. I never heard a foul word come out of his mouth. When Joe married and their first child came along, my sister and I took turns babysitting for them. Joe would be sleeping or grocery shopping or baking or paying bills. Sometimes he would be working on his radio-controlled boats. Not just a kit, but 6 to 7 foot boats he would take to Nimbus Lake, and we'd go along to watch. When we were babysitting at noon, we drove to the McGeorge School of Law so Sherry could nurse the baby. Joseph paid us well and was appreciative of our time. He was a good father. He sent his girls to a Montessori school in their early years, and he paid for their college. While they were young, he paid for horseback riding, skating, and supported them in whatever they did. He cooked for them, kept a clean house and a neat yard. Through all this, Joe never forgot to visit Mom and Pop and come to the house on holidays. When Mom and Dad passed away, he came to visit my sister, and I cried. He always told us before he left, "Let me know if you need anything. If there's anything I can do." He always left us hugs when he arrived and left. This is from a niece. As I sit down to write this letter, I realize there's only one place to start. I wish my deepest sympathy, sorrow, and pain relief to all of the victims. I cannot imagine what any of you endured. I'm simply writing this letter to tell you I do not know the person known as the Golden State Killer. In no time did I see anything that would have led me to believe that. I know him as my Uncle Joe, whom I love clearly. My Uncle Joe was always my hero, the one I couldn't wait to see. I hunted as a child with him. We went crawdad fishing in the canal, ate pizzas, got ice cream, just plain had good times. We camped together as a family. He always made it a point to attend any special occasions I had. My wedding and my daughter's first birthday, to name a couple. I always felt that my uncle loved me and still do. I personally feel that someone else is inside of him who I do not know. Our last visit was 3 weeks before his arrest. We spent much time together talking, and I will cherish it forever. Uncle Joe, I will always remember your last words to me. I love you, sweetie, and I'll see you soon. The day we found out about the arrest, my mom called me, and I rushed right over to her house as I heard she collapsed. The detectives were there. We've been harassed by media, investigators, and people who blame us for something we had no knowledge of. I believed I knew my uncle, and I am still in shock. I feel for my cousins and family, as nobody understands, and we try to make sense of it, but you just can't. I do not know the person who committed those crimes. I know my uncle, who I love and always love. There's so much more I could say about what a wonderful uncle, dad, son, brother, and great uncle to my kids he was. My heart is crushed, and I will never be the same trusting person. I no longer have trust for anyone. It's really hard to end this letter, but I guess all I can say is I'm very sorry to the victims. I can't imagine what they went through. I love my Uncle Joe as I knew him, and that will never change because I can't wrap my head around the fact that someone so caring and loving could have done those things. Mr. DeAngelo would like to make a brief statement.
DeAngelo?
I've listened to all your statements. each one of them. And I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Defense submitted.
As he has desired since the beginning of this case, Mr. DeAngelo has accepted responsibility for his crimes by pleading guilty and has even admitted uncharged crimes. He's now prepared to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. Reference to Sacramento Probation Department for pre-sentence investigation report was waived at the time of plea, and the 1203.C report was requested or will be requested. Court's also considered the sentencing memorandums submitted by the defense as well as the people. With respect to the approval of this disposition, the court approves of this plea. I have considered the comments of counsel, the facts in this case, as well as the overall circumstances of this disposition. I've considered the defendant's age, the fact there are inmates currently on death row and have been so for 30 years. I have considered the fact that there is currently a moratorium on the death penalty in California. Furthermore, this disposition does give survivors and their loved ones an opportunity to have their words heard, not to endure the unimaginable emotions that they would experience by sitting through such a trial. Finally, with this resolution, the California taxpayers have been saved tens of millions of dollars. For the reasons stated, the court approves of this plea. However, the court is not saying that Mr. DeAngelo does not deserve to have the death penalty imposed. It merely means the court feels it would never come to pass. In truth, all the parties should be commended in reaching this resolution, for the result of this trial and a plea of guilty is the same. Mr. DeAngelo will spend the rest of his natural life and ultimately meet his death confined behind the walls of a state penitentiary. I generally don't make comments at sentencing, but I am going to make an exception. Having approved of this plea, I will now move on to the imposition of sentence. Mr. DeAngelo, I've listened for the last 3 days from the people you've terrorized and their friends and their family. Their impact statement will always be with me. I was moved by their courage, their grace, their strength, all qualities you clearly lack. I know whatever words I say today will pale in comparison to the words the survivors have spoken. They need to be said. The fundamental principle of law that justice delayed is justice denied is no truer than in this case. But for the dogged persistence and perseverance of law enforcement, their survivors, their families, and citizen detectives, this case may have remained unsolved. There are many heroes like Carol Daly, Paul Holes, Michelle McNamara, and many heroes that I don't even know that brought this day here. I have little doubt, but for the tenacity and unwavering quest for justice exhibited by Sacramento District Attorney's Office, Emery Schubert, you may have escaped earthly justice altogether. Have I listened to the survivors and I've watched you? I could not help but wondering, what are you thinking? Are you capable of comprehending the pain and anguish you have caused? To quote the great American novelist and California native John Steinbeck, to a man born without a conscience, a soul-stricken man must seem ridiculous. To a criminal, honesty is foolish. You must not forget that a monster is merely a variation, and that to a monster, the norm is monstrous. Mr. Steinbeck seems to think that monsters are born and not created. I'm not so sure, but one thing I do know, when a person commits monstrous acts, they need to be locked away where they can never harm another innocent person. It is my sincere hope that with the opportunity to be heard these last few days and the sentence to be imposed, the survivors will find some resolution, find some peace, and hopefully find some justice, however imperfect. Mr. DeAngelo, I sentence you to the following. Count 1, the charge of murder in the first degree of Claude Snelling, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, The court hereby sentences the defendant to imprisonment for life. By operation of law, the minimum parole eligibility for this offense is 7 years. Regarding the weapon enhancement, that in the course of that murder, that you personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed for the first-degree murder of Claude Snelling. Count 1 will run concurrent with a sentence to be announced in Count 2 by operation of law. Count 2, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and in conjunction with the multiple murder special circumstance Penal Code 190.2, paren A, paren 3, and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 5, this court hereby sentences the defendants to life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. The court imposes a sentence of 2 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in Count 2 is to run concurrent with the sentences on all pre-1979 offenses. However, the life without the possibility of parole sentence as to Count 2 will run consecutive to all post-1979 life without the possibility of parole sentences in Counts 4 through 13 and Count 26. Count 3, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Brian Majori, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and in conjunction with the multiple murder special circumstance code 190.2, paren C, paren 3, as well as Penal Code Section 190, paren C, paren 5, the court hereby sentences you to life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 122.5. The court imposes a sentence of 2 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in Count 3 to run concurrent with Count 2 by operation of law. Count 4, for the charge of murder in the first degree, Deborah Manning, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, a murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a rape, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, and burglary, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, paren 5. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 122.5. The court imposes an additional sentence of 2 years to run consecutive. The sentence to Count 4 to be served consecutive to Count 2 and consecutive to sentence to be imposed in Counts 5 through 13 and Count 26. Count 5, for the murder of the first degree of Robert Offerman, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, that is the murder having also been committed while engaged in the commission of burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 3, paren 5. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapon enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. The court imposes a sentence of an additional 2 years to run consecutive. Sentence in Count 5 to be served consecutive to Count 2 and Count 4, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in Counts 6 through 13 and Count 26. Count 6. For the murder in the first degree of Sherry Domingo, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in Count 6 to be served consecutive to Counts 2, 4, and 5, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in Counts 17 through 13 and Count 26. Count 7, for the murder for the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes an additional sentence of 2 years to run consecutive. The sentence in count 7 to be served consecutive to counts 2, in counts 4 through 6, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 8 through 13 and count 26. Count 8. For the charge of murder in the first degree of Charlene Smith, violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 8 to be served consecutive to counts 2, and counts 4 through 7, as well as consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 9 through 13 and count 26. Count 9. For the first degree murder of Lyman Smith, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 9 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 8, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 10 through 13 and count 26. Count 10. For the charge of murder in the first degree of Patrice Harrington, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaging in the commission of rape, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, and paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 10 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and 4, count 2 and 4 through 9, and consecutive to sentence to be imposed in counts 11 through 13 and count 26. Count 11, the charge of murder in the first degree of Keith Harrington, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder was committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 11 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 10, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 12, 13, and 26. Count 12, for the charge of murder in the degree of Manuel Whitney, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7, and robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 1. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 12 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 11, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 13 and 26. Count 13, for the charge of murder in the first degree, Janelle Cruz, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and that murder was committed while engaged in the commission of a rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 13 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and 4 through 12, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 26. Count 14, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, that the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, then more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 14 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 15 through 25 by operation of law. Count 15, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding for the weapons enhancement, at the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court hereby imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 15 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and count 14, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 16 through 25 by operation of law. Count 16, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 16 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 and 15, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 17 through 25 by operation of law. Count 17, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 17 be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 16, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 18 through 25 by operation of law. Count 18, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 18 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 17, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 19 through 25 by operation of law. Count 19, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 19 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 18, and a sentence to be imposed in counts 20 through 25 by operation of law. Excuse me. Count 20, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement in the course of that kidnapping, defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 20 will be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 19, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 21 through 25 by operation of law. Count 21, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 21 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 20, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 22 through 25 by operation of law. Count 22, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 22 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 20, and a sentence to be imposed in counts 23 through 25 by operation of law. Count 23, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 23 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 22, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 24 and 25 by operation of law. Count 24, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 24 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 23, with a sentence to be imposed in count 25 by operation of law. Count 25, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 25 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 24 by operation of law. Count 26, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional sentence of life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposed a sentence of 2 years to run consecutive to the sentence just imposed. The sentence in count 26 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 13. The aggregate sentence for Joseph James DeAngelo is the following. Counts 2 and 14 through 13, he's committed to the state prison for the indeterminate term of 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The sentence to run consecutive to the indeterminate life term for count 26. The weapons enhancements in counts 4, 5, 7, and 26 consist of an aggregate determinate term of 8 years to run consecutive. Another way to state the sentences as follows. Mr. DeAngelo is sentenced to a total of 11 life without the possibility of parole sentences, plus an additional life sentence, plus an additional 8 years. This is the absolute maximum sentence the court is able to impose under the law. And while the court has no power to make a determination of where the defendant is imprisoned, the survivors have spoken clearly. The defendant deserves no mercy. Credits are restricted to 850 actual days. The California restitution statute, Penal Code Section 1202.4, did not take an effect until January 1st, 1985. Prior to that, there was no provision for restitution. The court will order restitution for count 13, the murder of Janelle Cruz. If the defendant is entitled to a hearing on that restitution, the Department of Corrections is authorized to collect restitution according to the acceptable statutes and regulations. The order for restitution is enforceable as a civil judgment. Prior to 1984, Penal Code Section 672 provided a fine to up to $5,000 for a conviction of a felony. Commencing January 1st, 1984, the fine was increased to $10,000. Consequently, counts 1 through 12 and counts 14 through 26 are subject to a maximum of $5,000 fine, and count 13 is subject to a maximum of $10,000 fine, and I order these fees and fines to be imposed at the maximum. Pursuant to Penal Code Section 290 or 290, you must register as a sex offender with the chief of the police in the city or the sheriff or the county in which you reside for the remainder of your life. You must submit to an AIDS test. Pursuant to Penal Code Section 1202.1, you are advised that you may never own or possess a firearm or ammunition for the rest of your life. You are ordered to satisfy the requirements of Penal Code Section 296 and 296.1 by providing DNA samples as well as thumb and palm prints. Having waived your appeal rights, the advisement of appellate rights are not applicable. The court reporter will prepare a transcript of these sentencing proceedings to be filed for any future dates. Counsel, is there anything else before we adjourn?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. DeAngelo, you're now remanded to the custody of the Sheriff of Sacramento to be delivered to the custody of Director of Corrections and Rehabilitation to serve the remainder of your life in state prison. We are adjourned.
Okay, we're ready to start. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going to start with DA Amory Schubert.
Thank you. So after the last 2 years of court proceedings, many people have asked and wondered, really, who is Joseph DeAngelo? Is he a feeble, old 74-year-old man? Is he psychologically impaired? Is he physically impaired? Is he even competent to stand trial or to enter those guilty pleas we saw on June 29th when he rolled in a wheelchair and feigned feebleness? The answer to those questions that so many people have wondered for the last 2 years lies within the definition of a sociopath. A sociopath, in our world, we understand, is a person who has no respect for the rights of other human beings, no respect for the law, no compassion, no empathy, no remorse. He is a person who lacks a conscience or a soul. And under the definition of a sociopath, he is a person who lies, deceives, and manipulates others for no other reason than personal gain. Over the last 2 years, since the first day he was wheeled into a courtroom for his arraignment in a wheelchair in April of 2018, to the day of his plea on June 29th, to this entire week, sitting stone-faced in front of the world, each of us has witnessed a sociopath in action. The truth of who Joseph DeAngelo is lies not just in what happened in the courthouse, but what has happened in his jail cell. One only needs to look back a few months from today to see the real Joseph DeAngelo. We, as part of this team, felt that it was critically important to show the victims, the public, and perhaps the world, this sociopath in action. And I again would remind you of how things unfolded on June 29th when he pled. This is only a snippet of a CD anybody wishes to have at the end of these proceedings of his actions within his jail cell. This is June 1st, just a couple weeks before he pled. He's not a feeble old man, as he portrayed himself to be on June 29th. The next video I'm going to show you is from June 17th, just 12 days before. And before I play this, I ask you to watch it closely. Watch it for what he does. Watch his flexibility. Watch his dexterity. Watch his mental drive. Think back on the crimes that he committed. Think back about what he did to escape. Think back what he did to shadow the light. Mr. Totten reminded us a few minutes ago of how Mr. DeAngelo attempted to hide the light so he could remain in darkness during the commission of his crimes. And when we watched this, we were struck by what happened 45 years later. And we hearken back to those crimes of what he did to hide the light and to remain in the darkness. These are photographs from some of the crime scenes where he put blankets over televisions or lights. And so when you look back in time 4 decades and you now stand in the presence of 2020, you can see that Joseph DeAngelo is no different today than he was 45 years ago. And lastly, just a couple weeks ago, as you see on the top there, again, he's moved to a new cell, I believe, and he's got light once again covered with papers. And this last one is to simply demonstrate to you his mental acuity, his dexterity, his ability to deceive or attempt to deceive the entire world into believing he is a feeble old man. These are just snippets into the window of the mind of a sociopath. He is, quite simply, the definition of one. He has and always will be a sociopath in action. Today, the world knows that. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Spitzer, for his additional comments.
You know, we've talked so much about this case over the course of many months, and today really is and was the sentencing. And I made a comment earlier about just how proud I am to have worked with these prosecutors and their teams. To all the victims, I just want to say something. I know you know this, but I don't think the public understands sometimes just the fact that there was dogged perseverance and people never gave up to solve this case. The law enforcement community, I personally, and I know my colleagues, because we are part of law enforcement, that I want to congratulate them publicly. And I want to do it because I've talked to so many of the victims, and certainly the victims from Orange County, and I know just how thankful they are. And these are dedicated people. Many were retired, came back into public service to help solve this case. I hadn't seen these videos of the convict, to quote Drew Whitten, one of my victims from Orange County, who was a police officer in Garden Grove for 20 years. I hadn't seen these videos until today. But in our own presence, just a few minutes ago, quite frankly, Mr. DeAngelo tried to pull a fast one on all of us in our own presence, and we were witnesses to it. I'm not sure you saw how quickly he stood up out of his chair. I'm not sure you saw how strong his voice was. That voice was completely inconsistent with the body that he was trying to fake us all out with. My voice isn't even that strong. And I'm 20 years younger than he is. There's something about the proceeding that really upset me when he stood up and gave his statement. They tried to shift the sympathy table here today. They tried to get all these people covering this story to say something nice or empathetic about this monster. I was fixated the entire time on his eyes. The eyes are the windows to people's soul. He never looked up once, either during any of our statements or any of his own loved ones' statements. Everything this week was testimony of victims who despise him and his conduct. Today, we heard from people who love him. And this is what he didn't do, which upsets me greatly in his statement. He said, "I've listened to all of your statements. I'm very, truly sorry to everyone I have hurt." Everyone. Who did he leave out? The people who say they love him. He didn't just destroy your lives. Could you imagine being the daughter of James DeAngelo? Going through life asking yourself, did he pass on through my genetic framework something that makes me somehow the same? Or his former wife, the betrayal to their marriage and that relationship. He not only hurt all of you, he left a wake of devastation with his family members who have part of him inside of them. And that has got to be a terrible, terrible, terrible nightmare. So he tried to fake us out. And by leaving out his relatives, he proved to me that it was a fake. That statement apologizing was a fake. Because if he was truly remorseful about apologizing to everyone, to quote him, who he hurt, he would have included a hell of a lot more people. So I just want to say this. I am begging you not to report it that way. I think it was my colleague from Tulare County who said that this is going to go into the history books. The history cannot be remembered that he stood up here and apologized to the victims. It can't be that his niece said he was the most beloved person in her life. It can't be a friend who said he was one of the he was the sixth boy in the family. That was an effort to humanize him. You cannot humanize him. I feel so sorry for the family members and the friends who had any connection whatsoever. I don't besmirch them or in any way denigrate what they tried to offer here today. But I will not allow, as an elected prosecutor representing at least the 3.3 million people in Orange County, to have him remembered that way during his sentencing. It was a sham. He was not remorseful. He failed to apologize to important people. He left devastation in his tracks. I can never forgive him. Some of you are more mature and more spiritual than me. You have gone to a higher place than I can. I can't forgive him. I never will. Which is why I told him I wanted to watch him die. I wanted to watch him put to death. And I've already explained that, and there's no reason to dwell on it any longer. Today, when you leave this building, many of us will never see each other again. I want you to know that this has been one of the proudest moments in my career as a prosecutor. Whether as the elected or a line prosecutor, I started my career as a prosecutor, and I will end my career as a prosecutor. And I can tell you, I've never been more proud to be part of this family. You are part of our family. We are always part of your family. Nothing about these proceedings will change that in any way whatsoever. Because I told you I was selfish when I told you I wanted to see him put to death, I want to celebrate a moment right now. We did a moment of silence. I would ask you, as the victims' families and survivors, please join me in thanking my colleagues and all the law enforcement officials who are here today for everything they did to bring that, I'd love to, but I can't, that fill in the blank finally to justice. God bless my colleagues.
I'll invite any of my other colleagues up that wish to give a statement. D.A. Dudley.
I just want to remind everyone that today, good triumphed over evil. Victims who either were recipient witnesses or had to live their life without their loved ones, you're such good people, and you just keep on doing good deeds, and it makes all the difference in the world. And the law enforcement officers, Fred, you've been doing this for 30, 35 years. You followed this case. You were part of this case. And every other law enforcement officer who didn't sleep at night trying to find the answers. Your good people and your good deeds happen every day. And above all, I want to thank Anne Marie Schubert. She was our hero in all of this. She was the one who stood up and said, let's find him. And she inspired all the other district attorneys on this stage to work harder in this case. And we did. And Anne Marie Schubert, if it wasn't for you, none of us would be here today. Thank you. Thank your team.
I'm just going to say it, Team Justice. Anybody else? D.A. Becton, D.A. Ward, D.A. Salazar from San Joaquin?
Good afternoon. On behalf of San Joaquin County, we would like to thank District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, her team, her victim advocates, her investigators, my brothers and sisters from neighboring counties for their teams and their hard work and dedication to making this a day of justice, a day of truth. But most of all, I would like to thank you, each and every one of you, the victims, the survivors, families. Today is not about him. Today is about you. We're in a country that needs heroes. It needs people to admire and respect, to look up to and to believe in, to know that there is hope and there is goodness. And you, as the victims, the survivors, and the family members, give everybody in the great state of California and the United States of America somebody to look up to, somebody to admire, somebody to believe in, somebody to thrive to be. 1 in 3 women will likely be sexually harassed or raped in their life. 5 out of every 1,000 cases will be reported. But today, you're going to change that. It is one of the most unreported and most traumatizing crimes in our nation. But today, you give the power to the 995 other women out there who couldn't raise their voice because of the fear of what would happen, the fear of reliving it. You put that power in their voice, in their hands, and in their soul, and in their body to rise up so that someday my colleagues and I sit here and we say 1,000 for 1,000 spoke up and raised their voice and justice was sought for. So today, as my colleague from down south said, it's not, don't report about him. Report about these women and these men who've endured unimaginable pain and suffering, no doubt about it, like the likes we have never seen before. If you heard anything these last days, You know what true evil and terror looks like. But better and more important is you know what a hero looks like. You know what a courage looks like. You know what faith and strength in a better world looks like. I had the privilege of working with 4 victims, John and Jane Doe and Bob and Gay, for the last couple of years. Tough as nails, fought as hard as they could for this justice, and raised their voice at every step of the way to make sure that they were heard, they were seen, and that justice prevailed. And each and every one of you did that. Each and every one of you are what this story is about, because you're amazing, you're incredible, and you're a testimony to what makes America great, and that is its strength and its courage to look evil in the face and to say, we won, justice prevail. So on behalf of San Joaquin County, all of the members in my community, we thank the team of prosecutors here. You guys were amazing. Anne-Marie Schubert deserves an award for her leadership and what she has done to bring this case. But each and every one of you deserves a Medal of Honor for the courage and the strength that you've shown and for the power you have given to everybody in our country. So thank you.
Nancy O'Malley, Alameda County.
Thank you. I'm going to just echo everything that has been said already. I will tell you that for me today is I stand with all of the victims and with everyone else. I was there when this guy was raping women. I was in college as a victim advocate, and I went to the hospital with the victims. I talked to victims on the phone who were scared to death that they thought he was in their house. We lived in terror when he was on his reign of terror. And I'm so grateful that Anne-Marie Schubert and all of these incredible prosecutors and district attorneys banded together to make sure that we could solve this crime. I will tell you that this state has passed a law that requires law enforcement to submit every sexual assault forensic exam to a crime lab for testing. Because if we do not submit those exams for testing, that DNA will sit in a police evidence room or in a lab untested. And I'm grateful that we have been so strong in our advocacy to make sure that all kits are tested. And I just want to say that I'm so appreciative of DA Salazar for talking so profoundly about the challenges that women have and men have of stepping forward to talk about their victimization. And this case and the courage of all of the victims and the victim survivors that came up and bravely gave your statement, and bravely gave your statement when it happened with law enforcement, allows us to put this man away forever. So thank you for reporting this story so thoroughly. It's sensational, but it's also incredibly profound in what it says about our community, our society, and how we need to take care of each other. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll take some questions. Anybody else? Have I missed?
So, yeah,
Take
we're
some
going to,
questions now. Shelley's going to be in charge of all this now.
so anyone who wants to ask a question, please come to this microphone here. Please identify your media organization and your name.
Why he was committing these murders, these rapes in these different communities where he didn't live as well, such as Contra Costa County and Alameda County. Did he travel there? Did he visit people? We saw the statement from the wife saying that he said he'd go pheasant hunting. He says he's going to work, visit his parents from far away. Do we have any more clarity on why he picked those different communities?
I think probably from everyone that's worked on this, whether it's Larry Crompton or Paul Holes or Ken and Clark or hundreds of detectives, you can put in all the DAs that have been dedicated. The answer to those questions, I'm not sure we'll ever know, honestly. I mean, we've all I don't want to use the word speculated, but conjectured, have theories. It's the million-dollar question I'm not sure we'll ever know. So unless somebody else has some theory, Greg?
Another aspect of it is
This is a common question in major cases of this nature. And what you witnessed today was just the briefest of statements. And I think from a law enforcement perspective, I think we can all agree that we have no confidence that anything this predator would say about why he engaged in this type of conduct would be honest. I think, many other cases we've seen predators try to minimize their conduct or blame it on some circumstance of their childhood or some mental health condition. We have no reason to believe, notwithstanding some of the letters that were read to you, we have absolutely no reason to believe that this man suffered terrible trauma as a child. He lived a normal life. We have no reason to believe that he will ever tell us the truth. And if he does make a statement, we would tend to doubt the veracity of that statement.
I just want to before I go to the next question, I just wanted to make it somewhat of an additional comment, and it really is in line with Mr. Spitzer of, his statement today. And one of the victims, I don't remember who it was, but said, his last victims were his family. And I believe that to be true. And we heard some statements today. But I would remind folks that while some folks said he was a normal teenage boy in their neighborhood or group, he was a teenager who was blowing up animals, breaking into homes, and learning how to become a serial rapist and a serial killer. So please don't ever forget who the real man is.
I'm Rowena Shaddix from Fox 40. Is the work on this case completed? Because I've spoken to one of the special agents that investigated this in Sacramento, and he said there were still rapes, murders that he believed was linked to Joseph DeAngelo, but hasn't been proven yet.
I mean, I think we'd all probably collectively say, and many of the folks like Erica Hutchcraft from Orange County, Paul, Ken Clark, Larry Poole, who have dedicated their lives, I mean, we know what we know, Rowena, that's where'd you go. We know what we know. We know, because of the power of the data bank that the Harringtons brought to us, we know what's been put into it, and we know what's been linked. Does that mean that there are not other crimes out there? Absolutely not. I don't believe we will ever know the magnitude of what Mr. DeAngelo did.
Anne Marie Hill, Paige St. John with the Los Angeles Times. Had this case gone to trial, if you had not had the DNA match, would you have had enough evidence to get a guilty conviction?
Well, I mean, that's like asking us to take away evidence that we didn't have, Paige. I mean, we had overwhelming evidence of the signature of the crimes, the manner of which they were committed. Then you find out everything fell in line. He was a police officer. He was in the military. He lived in the areas. But let's be honest, it was the DNA that became the most critical piece of evidence but for that, we wouldn't be here today.
But family tree matching has not yet withstood, as I understand it, direct challenge in criminal court. The majority of cold cases that have been solved have either ended in pleas, like this one did, or with defendants who have long been dead. So if a court had ruled that evidence inadmissible, aside from the circumstantial evidence of the geography and timing of Joseph DeAngelo's life, did your investigators post-arrest find significant evidence that incriminated him?
well, he sat in an interview room and he muttered to himself about his mother making him do it, or Jerry, or anybody else. But just to be clear, and to flip this really in a positive light, is that since, as Mr. Totten said, or others have said, since this arrest, close to 100 cases have been solved. And yes, cases have gone to trial in this country based upon investigative genetic genealogy, and guilty verdicts have come very swiftly. And yes, we've had pleas, and the last time I checked, somebody doesn't plead to the rape murder of an 8-year-old little girl in Fort Wayne, Indiana, if they actually didn't do it. So I understand it, but like the DNA data bank, when we get a cold hit off the data bank, that's an investigative lead that law enforcement then takes, and then you follow the dude around, collect his DNA, and you have a direct match of the East Area rapist, Golden State Killer, to Joseph DeAngelo. So, yes.
So, Todd Spitz, Orange County. Bruce and Ron Harrington testified yesterday in front of the court on their victim impact statement. And one of the things they shared is since the advent of investigative genetic genealogy, we've solved 93 cases throughout the country. That probably would have gone cold forever. When they, prior to introducing Proposition 69 in 2004, there were 1,200 cases solved because of DNA, and now there's 81,000. So I appreciate the question from the Los Angeles Times. I know it's a national periodical, but of course it covers Orange County because I'm just adjacent to Los Angeles. And I want to say this unequivocally. And they said it yesterday, I'm just repeating the words of the Harringtons. That is something that DNA is something I'm going to fight for till I go to my grave, to make sure we continue to collect DNA from every felon arrested in the state of California. It has brought more closure to more victims than the advent of anything since the fingerprint. So let's get clear about that. Investigative genetic genealogy has been an eye-opener, and it brought closure, as much as you can give that term, to this case. It was the linchpin that solved this case. I will never make excuses, but some of us are supporting a bill in the California legislature for opt-out on voluntary genetic databases, and the leadership of Anne-Marie Schubert and Greg Totten to come up with guidelines which govern the law enforcement use of how we use DNA. You should check out that periodical and that excellent work, both practical and academic. As prosecutors, we are abundantly protective of people's civil rights and the right to anonymity with respect to the use of DNA. We also know in the balance as government officials, sworn elected officials, that it has also been the biggest eye-opener to the solution of cases, to give some peace and some opportunity to people sitting in here today who would have no closure, not even anything close to it, if we didn't have the advent of those two tremendous advances in law enforcement.
We have our two last questions, and then we'll take some call-in questions, online questions.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bernstein from Reuters. I was just wondering, how certain are we that he stopped committing these crimes in the late 80s? And if he did stop them, can you offer any insight as to how someone like that might have been able to stop them? And did it bleed out and did it push out in other ways in his life? Since then, were there other signs? I'm just curious what your insight is.
I think I tried to answer that earlier. I don't think we'll ever know. I mean, honestly, on the day of his arrest, I got a text message from a colleague of a Wikipedia article about when did forensic DNA come into existence, and it coincidentally was 1986. And so, the question needs to be posed to Mr. DeAngelo. Whether he ever tells you the truth or not is, sorry about that.
Madison Wade with ABC 10. The items that were taken from his home, could you speak to what those items were, and if any of those were ever returned to some of the victims or survivors, if they belonged to them?
I don't think I can speak to those. I don't think so. I don't know about Amy or Tin or any of the other prosecutors, but I don't think it's, at this point, you know, I don't believe the arrest warrant or the search warrants have been unsealed from the court, so I don't think it would be appropriate to comment at this point. Maybe someday, though.
Thank you. We'll now take a few online questions.
This question is from Margaret Carrero with KNX 1070 in Los Angeles. This is to any of the district attorneys. What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
One more time, sorry.
What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
I think Mr. Spitzer made it clear.
I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I'll try to say it more succinctly for radio. It was all BS. The next sentence is, you don't stand up here with any sincerity to the victims and say you're covering everyone and fail to talk about your own family members who you betrayed.
The next question is from Tony Cabrera at ABC 7 in Los Angeles. Where does DeAngelo go from here? When will his prison location be determined, and when exactly will he be transferred there?
Typically, were it not for COVID-19, an inmate like the defendant would be transported to Tracy prison, where he would go through a screening process and eventually placed for a longer term stay. Inmates that are sentenced to life without possibility of parole are characterized as level 4, and there are only a small number of institutions in the state of California that are considered among the most secure and hardened institutions where somebody like this would go. We don't know where he will end up. We also know that at the current time, because of COVID-19, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is not accepting inmates, sentenced inmates. Most jails, I know my jail in Ventura County, I think has close to 80 inmates that have been sentenced to prison that have not yet been transported, and this is becoming an increasing problem around the state for the administration of local custody facilities. And unfortunately, Mr. DeAngelo is a beneficiary of this circumstance, but ultimately, we intend to make sure that he winds up in an appropriate institution for the magnitude of the crimes he committed and the character and the evil nature of this man.
Okay, so that concludes the press conference. There will be interviews with some of the elected DAs, I think some of the victims. We're going to take about a 15-20-minute break. And then there's our CDs up here with the full video up on this table. Thank you. Yes, they're all the same.